Welcome back, everybody, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We're doing one of my favorite segments always, and that is where we answer your questions. And then joining me to answer your questions is one of my favorite guests, Shannon Vasconcelos, who is a former financial aid officer at both BU and Tufts and works with me here at College Coach. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Good. All right. Why don't we jump right in and maybe we could start with a question for me because this one's a doozy
It
and it
is.
might take a little bit.
Yeah, it's a long one. So this comes in from Monica. And Monica introduces the question like this. I was looking at high schools for my younger daughter. My older daughter is at a traditional high school, which offers many AP classes. In fact, 30 or more are offered. I am looking at my younger daughter either attending that same traditional high school as her sister with AP classes, or instead attending a nearby IB high school. And looking at the schools, I am learning that perhaps the IB program actually provides a significant advantage by providing an easier track than an AP program to students applying to the most selective colleges, given the following reasons. So one, in obtaining an IB diploma for the most rigorous plan offered, students will take at max 3 courses at an HL level. Is that honors level?
Higher level.
Higher
Higher
level,
level.
okay. And 3 courses at
Standard
S level?
level.
Standard
Standard
level.
level.
Okay, so only 3 at high level. Whereas my older daughter at her high school will graduate with 10 or more AP courses, which would equate to the higher level IB classes. In order to be in line with other students who are taking the most rigorous courses available at her high school. So there's more, but I'll stop there.
Yes, because there's already a ton to unpack
Yeah.
here. All right, so let me back up first and just simply explain for our listeners who are not familiar with what an IB high school is. IB stands for International Baccalaureate, and the International Baccalaureate program is exactly what it sounds like. It's an international program, and it is typically more common in Europe and other parts of the world than here in the US. But there are definitely schools here in the US that also offer an IB program. Some might be a straight up IB high school in that everybody does the IB program, although not everyone will do the full diploma. And some schools, they might offer the IB full diploma program, but they might also offer APs, and students can kind of choose, do they want to do IB or do they want to do AP? In this situation, I am going to make the assumption that A, Monica is here in the US, and B, that the IB high school only offers IB. So there are no options.
Right.
So a couple of really important things to understand here. The idea that the IB program is easier, definitely not. The whole point of the IB program, especially internationally, is that it is preparing students for college. It tends to have them focus a little bit more in high school, and a lot of colleges outside of the US are actually 3-year programs. So instead of taking that first year like you do in the US where you kind of explore your options and then maybe you declare your major at the end of your first year, or some at many schools you even have till the end of your second year.
Right.
At a lot of schools you're going to go in with your major and that's what you're doing, and you're not, especially in the UK. The Scottish programs are a little bit different in that many of those are 4-year and you can explore a little.
Right.
But you choose a path when you are applying to the UK schools. So there's that. The IB program is not, you cannot equate higher level courses in the IB to APs. It doesn't work that way. And also, while it is traditional to do 3 higher level courses and 3 standard level courses, there are, I've spoken with this about this with my colleagues at certain of the most selective schools in this country. They are going to actually expect to see students doing 4 higher level courses. So if you're going to be competitive at some of those, this Stanford comes to mind immediately, a Yale, those students are generally going to have 4 higher levels versus 3.
Gotcha.
And the program itself all goes together. So again, it is a it's a diploma program. So there's a lot more that goes into that. There is a whole theory of knowledge class that students take. There's a whole paper that they have to write that is the culmination of their experience. So I would be looking beyond simply the number of most rigorous classes that you take. And again, I would not say that the higher level equates to AP and standard level does not. I would say it all equates to AP when a school is thinking about, and it really doesn't. It's different programs. Let me back that up. It
Right.
doesn't all equate. They are very different programs. So as an admissions officer reading an application from an IB student, you are not saying, oh, 3 higher levels, great, and then looking at another student and saying, ooh, 10 APs, because you also don't do that. You're not totaling up the number, and the student who does more APs is automatically more competitive than the student who does not. So I think there's a fundamental flaw in comparing these programs in this way. So that's
Okay.
A.
Okay, so A, 3 higher level is not easier than 10 AP courses. Answer to part A. Okay. Part 2 or part B. In addition, less testing is a benefit to the IB program. My older daughter will have studied, stressed, and sat for 10 AP tests by graduation. In contrast, IB students don't sit for their exam until May of senior year. They don't even obtain scores until July after graduation, when they already have college acceptances and are packing to leave. So when they sit for that IB exam, there is no stress. That's a lot of stress and study time that is alleviated in the IB program because it doesn't have the same testing rigor as the AP program. What say you?
What say I about this? Well, first of all, unless the high school requires that students take the AP exam after they take the AP class, there is no requirement that students taking APs actually take the exam or report those scores. Those are always an optional part. They're not a required part of the application process, and as such, they also don't really play a big role in how you evaluate applications. So I would say that, okay, first of all, if the student took, generally speaking, if a student's doing, let's say a student took 10 APs, like she's explaining about her daughter, I would say that generally that might mean, maybe 1 AP sophomore year, maybe 3 APs junior year, maybe it's 4, and then maybe 5 APs in senior year. Well, you don't sit for those APs for senior year until the end of the year when you've already been accepted to college, and you can or cannot decide to sit for those exams.
Right.
Whereas with the IB program, you must sit for those exams. It is a requirement of getting the diploma the final round is that. So on one hand, you actually have to take those exams when you do the IB full diploma, and you do not have to take them, again, unless the high school requires them, for any of the AP classes that you take.
Right.
And then also the scores are, again, an extra part of the process at the US system. So they're not a requirement. And in fact, when I was at Penn, we don't require official scores to be sent from those AP exams. We asked if there were any you wanted to report. We made note of them, but really that didn't come into play until after you were accepted and decided to attend. And then you could see what you might get some credit for in terms of those AP exams. We also offered some credit for IB exams. So same thing, right? You were going to send those scores in after you were already accepted and had decided to attend. So again, I don't know how your daughters handle stress, or if they find it was really stressful or not really stressful, but I don't think that the testing piece is necessarily any less stressful for the IB or necessarily more stressful for the APs on that front.
Okay, cool. So now for points
And
A and B.
One last
Sorry, go ahead.
note is that there actually are in some cases, students will sit for an IB exam at the end of junior year. So it isn't always the case that you only do exams at the end of senior year. So just throwing that out there.
Okay, cool. Okay, so based on points A and B, I am seeing no clear winner between IB and AP.
Right.
So third, I think, and final point, colleges grant acceptances based upon quote unquote predicted score provided by the school counselor. I admit I don't know I don't know how predicted scores work, but could a generous, kind school counselor provide elevated predicted scores, which would be compared against kids who actually sat for AP exams? I don't understand why colleges look at the programs equally. What am I missing?
So for those of you who are not watching this, the taped version, I was just shaking my head no about the comparing predicted scores against AP. So you're not comparing you don't sit in committee or have discussions and say, well, this kid did APs and this kid did IB, and it just doesn't work that way. But let's go back to this whole concept of predicted scores. So colleges in this country do not grant acceptances on predicted scores. Colleges in the UK grant what they call conditional acceptances, and that's based on a student obtaining the scores that have been predicted. And in the UK, they do that also for students with APs. So if you want to go to school in the UK, you actually do have to sit for those AP exams, and they will set expectations in terms of the score they want to see, and then you need to actually hit that score. So, certainly that's very stressful, but as are the IB predicted scores, right? So if your predicted scores are at a certain level, the acceptance in the UK is based on those you actually achieving the scores that you're supposed to, right? Okay, so this is how that works. The teacher of the individual class provides the predicted score. At most IB high schools in this country, the teachers are also giving grades. So that's not always the case, and it may not be the case at the schools that your daughter is, or the high school that you're considering for your daughter, but there are many IB programs in this country that give grades. And so the schools are looking at those grades. If they don't have grades, if all they have are predicted scores, then obviously they're going to be basing their decisions on those predicted scores. But those are determined by the teachers. They are also overseen by the larger IB organization. So if you had teachers being kind or really nice and predicting scores that were inflated, that would be a problem for that IB school. There is considerable pressure on those teachers to be accurate in those estimations. And then, just the simple fact of, if you as a college admissions office are reading files from an IB high school that are coming in with inflated IB scores, and then you see the actual scores that the student gets and they don't match up, that's going to be a problem for your high school. And now you're going to be flagging that those kids in future years, like, well, these predicted scores are always inflated. So how do you take anything that the school tells you seriously? So the school's reputation really depends on them being as accurate as possible. They really do not want to inflate anything. So no, a kind and generous school counselor is not going to be artificially inflating those predictions. And they're not comparing them against students who sat for AP exams. So the colleges look at the programs equally because students have different choices. So what the schools that care about you being in the most rigorous curriculum available are going to be evaluating what was available to you in that high school, in your high school, and what did you take advantage of? And if you went to a school with the IB diploma program, then they're like, awesome, you're doing the most rigorous curriculum available to you, and we will evaluate you with that in mind. The IB program, and as are the APs, are more than just you take a test and see how you do on the score. It's all about learning and all of the things that go into it. And I would encourage you to dig much more deeply into the IB program and look at everything that's involved, rather than simply looking at your perception of these tests, or this equates to IB. It doesn't equate. So stop trying to equate it. You really want to look at them individually and make the call about what will be best for your student. And what was best for her sister or stressed out her sister might be non-stressful to your younger daughter, or the IB program might be a perfect fit for her, but it won't be easier and it won't be viewed as such, nor will, so I guess that's all I can tell you at this point. So I'm a little fired up there, but I think in short, what are you missing? You're missing all of the stuff I just shared, and hopefully you will take that into consideration. All right, I need to look at our time because, as I suspected, that took a very long time, but we have plenty of time to get in a finance question. All right, so this question comes to us from Al. Hi, Elizabeth, Ian, and Sally. Love your show. Thanks, Al. We love our show too, and we're glad you like it too. In one of the episodes, one of your guests mentioned that the FAFSA must be submitted every year by the students getting financial aid, but not all CSS schools require so. I think, okay. If so, how can I find out the list of schools that do not require reapplying CSS applications? Okay, so that not all CSS schools require that you fill out the
A
CSS
CSS
form
profile each year, correct?
each year, exactly. I guess Northeastern is one of them. Question. I'm asking because my daughter is a high school junior and I expect my income to increase significantly in the next year so that she may qualify for some aid in freshman year in college, but not in the sophomore year. I know a little bit
Yes.
about this, but take it away, Shannon, because I don't know enough to be dangerous.
Right. So, Al, I think you're right in your initial premise that yes, every college requires the FAFSA and requires the FAFSA every year. That is a federal government requirement. If you're applying for any sort of federal government student aid, they need the FAFSA each year. Many almost entirely private schools require this other financial aid application called the CSS Profile. Certainly freshman year. Many schools require the profile all 4 years. The two colleges I worked at did in fact require the CSS profile all 4 years, but there are a number of colleges that only require the CSS profile the first year, do not require it in subsequent years. Northeastern is one of them. You're right about that. Here's where I think things are a little bit off in your premise, Al. Just because a college does not require the profile in continuing student years does not mean they are not going to take your increase in income into consideration because that you could have answered it,
income.
Ben.
Exactly.
Right. They're picking up your income from the FAFSA, which is going to be required every year. So that generally those colleges that don't require the profile every year will use sort of some baseline profile data of elements that are only available on the profile, such as the big one is home equity that they don't ask about on the FAFSA. They're just kind of assuming that's going to stay pretty consistent from year to year. So they're not going to make you jump through the hoops of filling out the form when they can pick up the most important element, your income, on the FAFSA. And if your income skyrockets, your aid can in fact go down in those subsequent years. Even if they're not looking at the profile, they are still looking at the FAFSA. That is at the vast majority of schools that don't require the profile in subsequent years. However, one important caveat, particularly because you called out Northeastern, there are a few schools, very, very few, that do in fact guarantee financial aid for all 4 years, specifically institutional grant money. They can't guarantee any federal student aid because that does require the FAFSA each year, but they guarantee you that your institutional grant money will not change over your 4 years of college, no matter what happens with your income. Northeastern is one of them. Boston University is one of them. And I believe Gonzaga is another one. Those are the only 3 that I know of off the top of my head. There might be a few more out there, but they are very, very few and far between. So in fact, at those 3 particular schools, you're right. If your income increases later, that won't be sort of picked up. You will still get your same institutional grant money. But those are the only 3 schools. Just because a school doesn't require the profile in future years does not mean they're guaranteeing your aid for 4 years. They're still going to pick up on income changes on your FAFSA.
So can I safely assume there isn't a list that exists out there that everyone out there just needs to be able to access, where of the schools that don't require the profile after year 1 or that will guarantee your institutional grant money? That's not something that exists anywhere.
Not that I know of. And again, the schools that guarantee your institutional grant money is going to be a very, very short list. I'm not sure if there are any beyond the 3 that I mentioned. Again, there might be 1 or 2 more, but a very, very short list.
Got it. Okay. I think we have time to fit in at least one more before our break.
Okay. All righty. The next question for you comes from Rachel. She says, I love your shows. Question about sending regular decision applications early. Is there any downside to sending applications, say, 1 month early to the January 1st regular decision deadline? Here's the background. My well-organized senior daughter sent early applications 1 week earlier than the due dates to her 3 early action colleges. 2 were reaches, 1 was a safety school. Regardless of the outcome of these early results, she has a solid, well-balanced list, as per her counselor, of
Nice.
9 more, yes, of 9 more schools for regular admission. And my daughter already finished writing supplemental essays for all of these schools. So there's not much left for her to do. Since the senior year is getting hectic, I, mother not daughter, started thinking that maybe she can send them one by one now instead of waiting to do so till mid-December, unless there is a downside. What do you think? Any insights would be appreciated.
So there's no downside. It doesn't give you an advantage to get them in earlier beyond just the knowing that, okay, everything is in, I don't need to worry about it. And in fact, my son submitted almost all of his applications probably about a month before the deadline, because he was ready to. So there was no reason not to. And he didn't have a lot of extra writing. So that's one of the reasons he was ready early. The only thing I would say is that if any of those early action colleges, so if any of the schools on her list are schools that she's less excited about than the early schools she's already submitted, I get, will she still want to apply to those schools if she gets into any of those, the reaches in particular? And if the answer is probably not, then I guess the only downside is you could save the application fee by waiting to submit those applications until you hear back from the early action institutions. But if that's not the case, if she needs to hear from all of them so she compare financial aid offers or anything like that, then no, there's no downside. They will be processed and they will go into kind of like a holding area before they're released for regular decision reading. So again, there's no advantage, but there's absolutely no downside or disadvantage beyond paying a fee for an application that perhaps your daughter wouldn't submit if she gets into another school in the early round. So that's
Right.
really it.